Hello and welcome to this next iMesh video. So I recently did a tutorial video on how to use Eevee Next, and it actually came out way better than I ever expected. And I've had quite a lot of people asking me how to make individual assets from the scene. And one of the ones which I really enjoyed making was actually the rug. So this tutorial, I'm going to do a much slower tutorial to teach you all the ins and outs of how to actually make a rug yourself inside of Blender. Now, there's not many tutorials out there for actually making a rug. And I'm also going to add a couple of extra features on top, kind of a bit more advanced level, so you can tweak different elements about the rug. And I'm going to tell you why I'm going to do it in certain ways and try to go into it in a bit more detail. Now, as we are iMesh, we do have an asset library of over 2,200 individual assets now for ArcViz. And if you are looking to get into ArcViz seriously, I do recommend you do get some sort of asset library to help you along, because clients do not pay you to make all the individual assets. Time is money, so having assets is a great way to take it to the next level. But I also do believe that everyone should also learn how to make individual assets themselves, because there will be a time where a client says, oh, I want this specific chair. And that chair just won't exist online. So you'll have to make it yourself. And that is the same for rugs, for example. We do have rugs on iMesh, of course, but a client might say, well, I actually want a round one or one that's a funny shape. And then you'll be like, oh, well, how do I make a rug then? So this tutorial will teach you how to make a rug, so you can go forward and do that yourself. But of course, please do check out iMesh if you're looking to get an asset library for a pretty ridiculous price for over 2,200 assets. That's like a few cents per asset or something. So anyway, let's jump straight into the tutorial. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is add a plane, and then I'm going to go into edit mode with tab, press S, Y, and scale this on the Y axis a little bit, just so that it kind of looks like a rug shape. I'm then going to press E just to extrude that up. I'm then going to press 2 to bring up edge select. Then I'm going to do Control Shift Alt and click on this edge, and that will select all the other edges. I can then do Control B and then just add a couple of loop cuts like this, and then select the bottom face and then do Control B again. Something like that, and then we can delete this face here. I think maybe it's a little bit too thick. Let's just press A and scale this on the Z axis. Then I'm going to add a bunch of loop cuts like this. Now, I can then shade smooth. Now, in the previous tutorial, I did actually add a displacement modifier, but I'm not going to bother with that because I think I actually want to add the variety with the fur itself. So I'm going to go back into edit mode. I'm going to press O. I'm going to choose sharp. I'm going to press 1 to bring up a vertex select, and then I'm just going to bring these edges up ever so slightly, because that's what real rugs do. Just something like that. Right then, so now we have the basis of the rug. Let's actually call this one rug. So now what I can do is I'm going to do Shift A, I'm going to curve, and then click on fur. So we have a crazy looking thing here, and that is basically the default for all the fur. So if you go to the modifiers section, we can see that it created all of these. And we can see it says invalid UVs on 192 curves. So if I click this one, we do need to unwrap it. So if I press Tab, press A, U, and then unwrap, then if I go to the UV editor, by default, the cursor is here. So if I press A and then, oh, let's set this to pivot point here, and then SX, and we can scale this up like this, just so that it covers basically the whole surface. There we go. So now if I click here, we basically have all these modifiers. If I turn off the frizz, it looks less frizzy. If I turn off the noise, it looks less noisy. So this is basically 100% flat. Now this does look a little bit strange, and that's simply because it's added the fur and then I changed the UVs. So I do need to reapply the fur, and I'm going to do that anyway. But let's just work with this for a second, because I want to show you how this works. So if I go to the sculpt mode and turn this on, we can see that there are all these tiny little white markers. Now if I press minus here and then press F, and then I'm just going to go to wireframe, I'm just going to remove all of them except for one, just so I can show you what they actually do. So let's remove this. Let's try projected. There we go. There we go. So now that has also fixed all the UVs, because all of the guides have now been removed. And we just have one left. So if I go to solid view, if I was to press the comb brush and comb that one, we can see that this is basically telling all the other hairs what it should be doing. So if I wanted to add another one, let's click one over here, and maybe one over here, and then click the comb, we can say that these ones go over here, these ones go over here, and then these ones go this way. So this one, now each one basically has an area in which that affects the fur around it. So if we added loads and loads of them, like this one here and added loads all over the surface, we will then far easier be able to tell each individual part how that should be looking when we comb it. So that's what we want to be doing. But the fur is too big. So let me just remove that again and start with nothing. I'm going to click this button here. I'm then going to click this button and set it to 0.02 because this is not going to be fur that's too long. And then I'm going to set the count to 50. Then what I'm going to do is just simply brush over the surface so there's a nice even amount throughout. Right then, so now if I was to comb the fur, let's go turn this off, we can see that we can affect each individual part because there's now enough guides to tell each individual hair how it should be affected. Okay, so now that we have this area, if I go to the side view and I choose the comb brush, I basically want these fur to be pushed away from the ground. I don't want it to be against the ground. I want it to basically go upwards. But from this point, I can't. So if I go to the other side as well, I can see that even if I brush it this way, these ones are not being affected by it. So I do need to add some more guides along the bottom. So I'm going to press plus. I'm going to maybe lower it to maybe like 30. And then what I want to do is if I choose something like this and go like this and brush along this edge, you'll see that the brush relative to this front area takes up most of this space. Whereas if I go down like this, the brush is now huge. So the density of the fur is going to be less. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press 5 to go into orthographic view. And then what I'm going to do is actually let's lower this to 15. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the top edge, and then I'm going to go along the exact bottom edge so that I do try to pick up this whole area. So let's actually just do it a bit bigger like this for now. And then I'm going to press N. I'm going to choose stroke and I'm going to choose line. Let's just go from the side here and let's just draw some extra guides like this. And then make sure I've got enough along the bottom. Something like that. This is, oh, it's not dense enough. This is probably a bit overkill for this amount of guides on this edge, but I basically just want to show you how this works. Right then. Okay, and then do both other sides. Okay, so now we have enough fur on the side. So let's have a look how this works. So if I click on the brush and click on projected, I can then tell it that I don't want these hairs to be touching the ground like that. And if I go to this side as well, let's brush these all up. And then also if I go to interpolate hair curves, I can increase this to maybe 25,000. We can see that there are some hairs which are still going through the ground, but I think that should be fine. Most hairs are being pushed away, but the odd one going in doesn't really matter. So let's just brush these up as well. Most hairs are going that way, so that's good. Let's go like this. You can add more guides along the bottom. I think you actually should probably have a bit more geometry on the original object so that works a bit better. But anyway, this is fine. When there's a big clump of them against the ground, you won't see them anyway. So let's now do these bits. Right then, so these edge pieces are done. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically comb over the whole top surface to try to add some nice variety. Now you have to kind of be careful here because if you brush like this, they're going to be brushed down through the object. So then you have to go back to the side and kind of bring them up again. But what I'm going to do is just brush over this whole thing quite randomly, just try to add quite a lot of variety. And if there are some going through the ground, what I'm going to do is just go from the side view and just very gently pull these ones up. Okay, so this looks nice and random here. You can also add a lot more detail. So let's say you add a table, you can then brush the certain hair out of the way of the table. And there's also a puff brush, which is pretty cool. So if you brush over the surface, the hairs will kind of be pushed away from each other. Okay, so this hair is looking good. I think that's good at that point. So now let's talk about the next modifiers. So if I click on this one here, we can see that basically adds some noise to the whole surface. This is always way too much. So what I can do is just increase the scale to like 0.75 to lower that a little bit, and then decrease the strength to maybe 0.2. So it just adds a bit more variety to the whole surface. And then we have frizz, and this one's very powerful. And let's actually make sure we turn on preserve length so that all the lengths stay the same. Let's preserve length. So frizz basically adds all the randomness to all the fur, because that is basically how fur acts in real life. But let's just reduce that again. So this basically makes it a bit frizzy, right? So it adds some nice randomness. What we can also do is if you go to the asset browser and then you go to the essentials, we do have a bunch more stuff as well. So if I drag this one, for example, onto here, we can see that it adds a lot more variety and there's loads of different things that we can do. And one which I really love, and that's clump. So now if I go to here, we can see that all of the curves are clumping up. Now they're clumping up to certain points. And if I go to sculpt mode, we can see that the clumps are being created by the actual guides that we created earlier. Now that does mean that there's going to be loads of really smaller clumps along the edge, but I kind of feel like the top surface will be where it's clumpy anyway, and the sides will be kind of spread out. So I don't think that really matters too much. But that does mean that if you want there to be more clumps or less clumps, then you need more or less guides. But I think this works nicely here. So what you can also do, so this has been added to the bottom. Again, I'm going to click preserve length. If I then put that above frizz, it will mean that it will add clump and then it will frizz. Whereas if I put the clump after frizz, it will make the frizz and then it will pull everything together again. So, so these modifiers, the order in which they go can dictate how your fur looks. Now, I always feel like some frizz at the end of any of it kind of looks good because nothing's too even. So that looks good. Maybe let's actually change the clump factor, maybe 0.5. Okay, and we can see that it is clumping quite nicely there. Right, so this is coming along quite nicely. One thing that I'm going to do now, and this is maybe a little bit more advanced, is that I do want certain areas to be higher and some areas to be lower. Now, I couldn't find a modifier in here that does that. Maybe I'm missing something. If I am, then please do tell me. But I have created a no setup anyway. Now, there is a trim hair curves, which can actually tell it where they should be certain length, but I found it way too complicated. If I add that into there, I'm not a geometry nodes expert, but if I go to here and go to geometry nodes, I was struggling to figure out where I should add certain elements. So I just made my own version. It's way more simple and it does exactly what I'm looking for. So what I'm going to do is just undo that. And what I'm going to do then is do that and add a geometry nodes. Then I'm going to click new. I'm just going to call this one vary height. Right then, so in here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bunch of nodes. But you can just fast forward to the end if you wanted to and just take a screenshot of the final product, but I'll just show you me creating it. So I'm going to just add a capture attribute, plug that into there. Then I'm going to type in set position. Then I can add a wave texture and then a vector math, and set that one to subtract, and then make another one, set that one to scale, and make another one, set that one to scale. Then I'm going to type in a spline parameter. Spline parameter. I'm going to plug this one into here. I'm going to plug the factor into the vector here, and then this one into here, and then this one into here. Then I'm going to add a combine XYZ, and then plug this one into the Z and plug this one into the offset. So we can see this is pretty crazy. Let's type 0.02. Now we can see we have some waves over the whole surface. The reason why I added this combine XYZ is because if I mute that, we can see that it will basically be pulling them all off into this direction, but I just want it to be affecting the Z axis anyway. So let's put that like this in 0.02. So we have some waves over the whole surface, and I do find that most rugs in real life, they are basically they are manufactured in rows. So you would generally see rows quite often. This is maybe too strong, 0.01. There we go. So this adds some nice variety over the surface. Now this subtract, basically, let's lower this interpolate curve. Let's try just 5,000, just make it a little bit faster. If I was to increase the scale, I can then bring this whole thing up or down. So that whole thing, the point at which it starts is increased or lowered. So if I put this to 0.01, I can then bring this whole thing up or down. But I think 0 is fine. But there's one thing which you might notice if you go to the edge. Now, if I increase this, you can see that even the ones on the side are being affected as well. But generally, I do want those ones on the edges to be against the floor and then the rest to be varied. So I do want to find a way to adjust just that area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click back on this original object. I'm going to go to edit mode. I'm going to press 3 and then select this edge, holding Alt, press plus, 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 and maybe plus once more, and then do Control I. Then I'm going to go to data, add a vertex group, and I'm going to call that one just a mask, and then assign. So now if I click back onto this object, I'm then going to add a mix, plug that onto here, plug this one into the bottom one, and then the factor, I'm just going to type in group input, and then I'm going to press N under group and just make sure that that is a float. Then I'm going to click back on the modifiers, scroll down, and now we have an exposed value, which is basically this value here. And we can actually call that one, scale if we wanted to, or mask. Then if I click this button, we can then type in mask, and it has found that parameter. So now we can see these ones along the edges have not been affected. So if I remove that, we can see it's just these ones being affected and the ones on the edges are not, which is great. So let's type 0.01. So this kind of works fine, but let's say you wanted to actually use an image texture instead. So using a UV map. So this fur doesn't have a UV map, but we can get the UV map from the actual original object. So I'm going to type in Shift A object info, and I'm just going to click on the rug, and then going to type in Shift A named attribute. Now, if I click back on this original object and go to object data and attributes, there is already an attribute created, and that's called UV map. So let's click back onto here and just type in UV map. There it is. Oh. Then I can do Shift A and then sample nearest surface, and then plug the geometry into here, and then the attribute into value, sorry. And then I'm also going to change this one to be vector as well. And then if I was to add an image texture, for example, this one here, just drag and drop it in. You can do Shift A and type in image. It should be image texture and not just image. Then if I drop the value into the vector, and then instead of the wave texture, plug this one into here, we can't really see very much. Let's add some more. Let's add some more of these. Let's try 150,000. Right, I've actually just turned off these modifiers because I couldn't quite see this texture, but we can see the texture kind of shining through here. This image texture doesn't have much contrast, but you can see its stars. So let me try to find an image with more higher contrast. So I've got this like stripy pattern here. So let's try this one. Okay, this works a lot better. Let's actually increase the scale to 0.05. There we go. So now we can see this texture here is applying quite nicely. So it's actually got some areas where there's some little dimples in there, which is cool. So this is now using the UV of the actual original object, which is quite nice because sometimes you make the plane and you have an image texture of a rug and you make the plane to the size of that rug. So having it be able to work with the actual UVs of the original rug is quite useful. But let's say that you actually want to scale this. So what I'm going to do is, let's just delete this. What I'm going to do is do Shift A. I'm going to type in vector math, and I'm just going to set this to scale. And then I could just type any value I like 3. Now you can see that this has now multiplied that value. So that's great. So now we have these along the edges, which are not being affected by it, just the ones on the top. Let's actually try 6 or let's try 8. So much smaller lines. I quite like this effect. Let's actually go a bit lower, so 0.02. Or 0.01. Okay, then I can just bring back the other modifiers. Right then, so this is basically it put together. So we can see that the whole object basically has like these ripples going throughout, which is kind of normal as you'd find in a rug, in a new rug anyway. And we can see that we can add more variety to the whole surface. We can also add more frizz if we wanted to, or we can even sculpt these areas even more. So now what I'm going to do is work on the material. So I'm going to go over to here and add a new material, click Use Nodes, go to Shade Editor. And then we can use the Principled BSDF. I do like the Principled BSDF. I think it works really well, even for these hairs. But I know most of you probably wanting me to add a principled hair because it's hair. So that's probably most accurate. So let's plug that one in and let's just reduce this a little bit. And then let's see how this looks. I'm going to enable denoising. Right, this looks pretty soft already. I do like roughness quite high. So let's try this. All right, so that actually looks very nice. I think you can imagine putting your feet into that. That looks very, very soft. But let's say we want to add an image texture onto that. Now, as I said, this isn't unwrapped. So let's say if I grab this just random texture here, and after plugging that into there, you can't actually see the UV. This is actually stripes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type attribute. Then I'm just going to plug that vector into vector. Then I'm going to type in surface underscore UV underscore coordinate. Right, this actually looks really nice. I think this looks like a very, very soft rug. But this is the actual texture I did actually use for these lines underneath. So I'm going to see if I can scale up this texture so that it fits in line with these lines as well. So I think I scaled it by 8. Yeah, so let's add a vector math again. Try scale. And then let's try 8. Right, so that works really well. So we can see each different channel now has the exact same color as the actual texture. Right, and I did actually forget to zoom out. So if you want to take a screenshot of this to actually get the finished product, then take a screenshot of this now so you know what to work with. But for this one, I'm going to reduce this back to 1 because I think that looked really nice. Right, so one thing that's not quite correct here is that these hairs are quite thick. So what we want to do is reduce this maximum value. That's basically how thick it is at the bottom. But the problem is if we reduce that value, there's going to be a lot more empty space. So we'll need to make up for that with more hair. So doing this will make it a lot more realistic and make it look a lot more like hair, but it will start impacting your computer quite a lot. I think this already looks great, but if you want to push it to the next level, let's try doing that. So I'm going to try 0.5 here, then increasing this to maybe 250,000. Okay, and with 0.5, we can see it's a lot less dense. So let's push that up again here. All right, so this looks very, very soft. I really like how this looks. This is basically the finished product with all of these parameters and adding your own values. I think I've hopefully given you a good basis for all the possible permutations that you might have for creating rugs. One thing you might struggle with is you might think, oh my God, my computer's so slow, I can't even move it. So what you might need to do is, like this is now just crashing my computer. So what you want to do is you go to viewport density and I just reduce that to 0.01. And now it should be a lot easier then to move this whole system. Right, so that's basically it. I think from this point on, you should be able to create most rugs that you want to create. I think the end result is very, very nice. I think that these fur particles are very underrated. I don't feel like people talk about them enough, but they're so powerful. And with this varied height thing that I created, I think you can basically create any rug that you desire. So yeah, thank you for watching. And also we are nearing 30,000 subscribers. So if you want to give me a like and subscribe, that would be amazing. That would be very helpful. And also, if you have any other furniture models that you want a tutorial for, then please do write them in the description. And I'm going to basically build a list and just try to work through them. Because I do think that everyone should learn how to actually model these furniture items themselves, like I said. But do check out imesh.com. We have thousands of assets and you should be able to create most scenes that you're looking for. But on the off chance your client does ask for something very specific, it is nice to be able to create one yourself. So I'll try to do more tutorials like this. So thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you.